Compared to the United States, the political atmosphere is tense. Is this a wave of some sorts blowing across the world? And what will be the fate of democracy at this rate? We'll find out tonight on the program. Hello and welcome. You're watching Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikiolu here in Lagos. Well, so much drama in the political space. Interestingly, most of it outside the country, and it's all centered around power, which some have said is the main currency of politics. But what is power without the people, right? So let's check on the people first and be sure they're getting good value from the government's policies and its agencies. If you ask those who have had to queue endlessly for days across the nation for the National Identity Number enrollment about government policies, specifically the one concerning the NIN, then you can imagine their response. It's been an arduous experience for a majority of those who are in a last-minute rush for the linking of SIM cards with the NIN, with the deadline set for February the 19th, 2020. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, members of the public got to the registration centers today, some as early as 4 a.m., 5 a.m., only to meet the strike notice by staff of the NIMC. Now, announcing the strike, the Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria, NIMC branch, said that strike was for 4 reasons. First, exposure of staff to COVID-19 risks, lack of personal protective equipment, irregularities in promotion, and poor funding. So those are 4 of the reasons that NIMC officials, or let me say workers, went on strike. And well, there's a part of a statement that was put out. All members at the local government offices and special centers are advised to stay away from their various centers, as task force and implementation committees will be on parade to ensure total compliance to the directive. Staff members were infected with COVID-19 and adequate measures have not been taken to curtail the spread. In the meantime, NIMC has been reacting to what it terms glitches experienced in the enrollment process, saying it is being resolved and normal enrollment will resume soon. Well, those are sites from across the country as Nigerians still besiege those centers to get enrolled. But some issues remain unsettled. Nigerians have complained about the 15,000 naira fee for correction of date of birth and another 5,000 naira for certain correction, a mistake they likely didn't make themselves. There's also the difficulties experienced in using the mobile app and pre-enrollment portal. And the big debate about linking this seamlessly with the BVN, driver's license, voter card, international passport, and other database that has the biometrics of Nigerians. Honestly, it sounds pretty basic. But then the reluctance of government and its agencies to toe this line leaves a lot of questions on the minds of Nigerians. So while that is playing out here in the country, there's been some intense political drama, but this time outside our borders. So let's get into it. Take neighboring Ghana, for example, where armed police and soldiers had to wade into a scuffle between members of parliament. And this happened just moments before President Nana Akufo-Addo was sworn in for a second term in office. Well, the country's newly elected members threw caution to the wind following a disagreement on the election of a new speaker. In fact, at some point, a ruling party lawmaker snatched the ballot papers while voting was still underway, sparking a confrontation. But afterwards, President Akufo-Addo was sworn in. And despite election monitors having asserted that the vote was transparent, opposition leaders claimed that the polls were rigged and they plan to contest the outcome in court. We shall show you. We shall put... But what happened in Ghana is mild compared to what played out in the United States, where a mob broke into Congress building as lawmakers were in the process of confirming the result of the U.S. election. Well, the context is quite similar to Ghana's. The disruptions took place in their legislative buildings. Both countries just concluded elections late last year. The election results are being contested in the 2 countries, but then one president won his re-election bid, while the other lost. Of course, talking about President Donald Trump, who has less than 2 weeks in office, has repeatedly alleged fraud in the November election without evidence. And that sort of built up to what we saw play out from yesterday. You can see pictures, and in the aftermath, at least 4 people were killed in the violence that played out during that riot. But a lot have happened since then. Let's just walk you through some of the major highlights that have come up since that incident. President-elect Joe Biden's victory has been confirmed. President Trump has promised an orderly transition, which sounds like conceding defeat to some, but to some others, it's not express. But then there's also bad blood between President Trump and his vice, Mike Pence, who presided over the confirmation of Mr. Biden as president-elect. And there may be plans to remove President Trump over the incident, but there's so much more really to cover. So watching all this play out was horrifying for a lot of nations, because America is considered as a gold standard for democracy in the world, and for a nation that has been battling racism, there are questions about what this means for the black nation, as we term it. So let's get into the conversation tonight. We'll be joined by a former Consul General of Nigeria to New York. He will be joining us from our Kano studio. But we also have Mr. Shehu Gabam, the National Secretary, Social Democratic Party. He joins us from our Abuja studio this evening. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Gabam, on the program tonight.
A great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, quite a number of issues to touch on, but let me begin with the NIN, issue. A lot of Nigerians are still uncertain as to what would happen now that, officials or workers of NIMSI are on strike. And the question a lot of people ask is, could we have handled this better?
Well, let me start by saying that it is not unexpected at all, given the nature of our behaviors as a people, as a government. We never prepared for a very serious way of dealing with very urgent issues. This issue of NIMS has been on for years, and so much propaganda about NIMS numbers and centers across the states. In virtually all the states of the Federation, is not functioning. People will go in and queue for hours, for days, for months. And it's difficult for the officers to meet up with the responsibility of providing the named number for the citizens. Billions and billions has been sunk into such project, and we are yet to see a very serious organization that have the determination, have the training, have the equipment that it takes to deal with the population of Nigeria. And to complicate issues, when the Minister of Communication, I think through a lot of consultations based on national security breaches across the country, based on abuse of the service providers' lines, criminals kidnapping people, using service providers' lines to negotiate for ransoms and so on and so forth. I've said this severally. Nigerian airspace is the only airspace that I've known around the world that is so vulnerable. And people take things for granted in the name of freedom. And of course, that is what we are paying for today. And tragically speaking, they don't have the capacity to cope with the pressure that is going on right now. And even the NCC, and of course the service providers and the minister himself knew clearly they don't have the capacity to meet up with this. So of course you expect frustrations and counter frustrations. You expect a lot of crisis surrounding it, especially when the debt expired and they begin to lock down or take away people's line. You expect a lot of crisis. It's been manufactured deliberately to create this crisis because the government had a lot of space to deal with these issues. They would have dealt with it. And what is the essence of having so many ID numbers? It doesn't speak well for a nation, as if we are just a weak institution. Every responsible government must prepare for its citizens. A country that have over 200 million people, You just run a crash program and you expect everybody to key in. It is not possible, it is not acceptable, and we must learn how to do things the right way. Otherwise, we'll continue in this crash program that will continue to truncate our social order, our behaviors, and truncate our friendly environment that is likely to attract investors.
Well, Mr. Gabam, let's expand this conversation, I mean, beyond the NIN, because as much as that is happening in the country, which is a major issue, we've also seen a lot of things happen outside the country, politically speaking, that is. And we're being joined also on the program now by Ambassador Habib Habu, former Consul General of Nigeria to New York. He joins us from our Kano studio. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the program. Well, from Ghana to America, we've seen this sort of impasse, tensions, if I could use that term, caused by elections and, of course, the bid of political leaders to get power. So the question for a lot is this a wave of some sort? Because we saw what happened in Ghana, seen what happened in the United States, and they're trying to understand what exactly is going on, Ambassador. If you could just help us understand this.
I think, good evening. Thank you for inviting me. I think the issue is the shift in the whole global society. And this shift was actually pushed by President Trump. We are seeing democracy changing. So whether it will be the normal democracy we have been used to, or it's a new one that is evolving, we have to wait and see.
But based on your projections, or what you have seen, the trends, do you think this is good for democracy? Because there are different ways to look at this for different people. Some see the cup as half full, some see it as half empty. How do you see this cup?
Well, essentially, what is democracy? Democracy is a government of the people. They say by the people, for the people. But then, is it the only form of government that actually works? For me, democracy is just a government that serves the people very well. Whether it has to be representational, whether it's autocratic, as long as the people are being served very well, I have absolutely no problem with it.
It's interesting. I mean, you bring up the issue about whether or not democracy is the best, really, because there are people who bring up the argument that, well, the majority is not always right, really. So if the majority says this is the way to go, does that mean that is the right way to go? But let's quickly bounce this off Mr. Gabam, who joins us from our Abuja studio, because, of course, he's a political actor also in Nigeria. So, Mr. Gabam, listening to Ambassador, really, and as a political leader in the country, seeing, I mean, the trend from Nigeria, African countries, to the United States, would you say this is a major dent on democracy?
It's quite very reprehensible. It is unbelievable, given the nature, the sophistication of democracy in America. A nation that championed the cause of democracy in other countries, pilot the affairs of other countries to conduct themselves within the norms and values of democracy. What we saw was a total embarrassment globally, as you can see reactions all over the world. Well, for me, it wasn't a surprise thing at all. From the day President Trump took over office, it was expected. He started by saying America first, which means it's a system of protectionism, which means other countries around the globe have to mind their own business and America have to mind their own business. So he created a system or a policy of isolation day one, which resulted to what we are seeing today, which increased the volume of racism in America, blacks, minorities, and so on and so forth, that lead to the result of what you have seen today, because the votes are very clear, that led to the defeat of the Trump. And of course, in the absence of diplomacy, for America that championed the cause of diplomacy around the world, to degrade itself to this level of isolating its own affairs and becoming so casual in the way and the manner they conduct the affairs of the country, speak much about what the leadership is all about.
Quite a number of issues you have raised.
The reaction of Trump after the defeat.
Right, you can land on that.
Yeah,
you can land on that briefly.
Yeah, so the defeat of the Trump and his reaction after election culminated into the whole issues that we have seen today. It is,
all right.
it is
Mr.
unexpected.
We're due for a break now. I just wanted you to land on that so we could take this break. But when we return, we'll expand on some of the issues you have raised. And don't forget, Ambassador Habu also raised some issues about democracy, the future of democracy. And we'll try to link, the dots as it applies to Nigeria. So please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Ambassador Habib Habu, former Consul General of Nigeria to New York, still with us in the program, as well as Mr. Shehu Gabam, National Secretary of the SDP. Ambassador joins us from our Kano studio, and Mr. Gabam joins us from our Abuja studio. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. So let me take this to Ambassador now, because Mr. Gabam, you raised some issues, but I would also like to get Ambassador's thoughts on this conversation that has been on since yesterday. So when unpleasant incidents happen in Nigeria, this is for Ambassador Habu, by the way, you have countries condemning such incidents. And for a lot of Nigerians, they've been asking the government to speak, that's Nigerian government, to speak about what has happened in the United States. It might be sarcasm, really, but it appears as though there's some consensus among some Nigerians saying, well, maybe Nigeria should also wade in. So do you think this will be of value? Do you see maybe this coming from the government?
Yeah, I support that view, that the federal government should make a statement on this very, very important issue, because the assault on the capital is such a grave incident that no country in the world should overlook. Nigeria must comment on it, because for doing less, America had come down heavy on us. So we must also not come down heavy on them. No. Just to give them our view that what happened was not a good trend for them to set after over 200 years of democracy. That now a president that I supported from the very beginning until the election period has now decided to do a coup against the Constitution of the United States. So I think Nigeria should make a common statement.
Well, you put out your own statement of sorts. You titled it "Democracy Under Threat in America," and you touched on some issues. You touched on racism to an extent, and for a lot of Nigerians, for a lot of Africans, they're worried for African Americans living in the United States, because we have seen the trend from pre-Black Lives Matter to after this whole thing. So you understand the politicking, you understand the environment more. So really, is this also going to affect the American, or rather the African nation as it is?
I think to understand this, we have to go back about almost 40 years. During the time of President Nixon, he had an advisor called Ben Wattenberg. That advisor wrote a very famous book, The Birth Death, in which he talked about the lack of delivery of white children by American women, which was creating a situation where the population of the white was going down, while those of the Black Americans and the Latinos were going up. And he pointed out that within a period of 30, 40 years, that the white Americans were going to be a minority. And he proposed three things. He said, one, that America should pay their women to deliver, as is being done in Europe. But then he said also the blacks and the Latinos will benefit. He canceled that. Then he said, okay, let's open our doors to immigrants. But then those that wish to go to America are from Africa and to Latin American countries. He also said no. So the only thing that they harped on was the issue of abortion. So for anybody that wants to understand this issue, he has to understand why this Planned Parenthood situation had been going on for over 40 years. The American society has decided that abortion must stop because 60 to 70% of all abortions in America are by white women. And if those 60% stop abortion, then the population of the whites will increase. This is the situation now. The situation is now at parallel. The Latinos and the blacks and the whites are now at almost 49, 51. The whites are still 41%. So
right.
the whites are worried, extremely worried that the power is slipping out of their hand. And if you look at it, 70 million white people voting for Trump tells you a lot that they are worried, extremely worried.
Okay, Ambassador, I mean, you have made that point. So let's take this to Abuja. Mr. Gabam, when this happens really outside the country, in Ghana, in the United States, we also try to link the dots back to Nigeria and understand really where we are headed in terms of our national context and the global context. Now, Ambassador spoke about the future of democracy. You are making some points before the break also, but you're a member of the SDP. That's neither the ruling party nor the opposition party. So really, would you say that democracy has worked for you so far?
Well, I can say clearly that the democracy is working. It's not working to our expectation because there's no perfect governance anywhere in the world. So there's no perfect democracy. But what I think clearly that led us into this situation is that we have digressed from embracing a culture of people that are career politicians into a culture of money politics, embracing people that have criminal tendencies, armed robbers, gangsters who will have money and come and buy over everybody. They will hijack the system, they will buy the system, and they will take over the system. And that is part of what we are suffering today. The profiteering of the political process, the culture of imbibing thuggery to hijack a decent process of election is the biggest threat Nigeria is facing ever. The vote buying is one of the biggest threats also Nigeria is facing ever, because virtually in all the elections that has been conducted, they are characterized around what I have just mentioned. So unless we embrace a culture, one as politicians, that look, somebody must win, somebody must lose. Number two, the transparency, the sanctity of the electoral process, the polling unit, must be upheld by all political actors, by INEC, by security agencies, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, democracy is under threat, as I'm talking to you right now. As per the dividend of democracy, it depends on who you are talking to. Given the situation that we are today, economically and politically, I don't think there's any Nigerian that will give you a good rating that yes, in terms of economic viability, the country is moving forward. There is no single investor, either locally or outside, that will invest in a society that is full of security breaches. Nobody will bring in his resources. And to an extent that economic advisors or the CBN is devaluing our currency with the sole aim of inviting investors that will come with their dollars and they change it into large volume of naira. But they will invest it where? In the society that is not secured, it is practically impossible. So all these are characteristics of a responsible government to understand that you must create a very conducive environment that is viable, that is stable, that is secured for you to expect the dividend of democracy, right, stabilization of the process, and the restoration of law and order. In the absence of all these, you cannot have a system that is enviable, that is strong, that is something we can all depend on. America as a strong institution, that all its fundamental pillars are strong, has been breached. You know, the National Assembly was hijacked to a large extent that even the office of the Speaker and the Senate were hijacked. So this show a very clear cause that we are not meeting the demand of the citizens. The world have produced too many citizens that they cannot provide for their needs. So the need of the citizens of the world is increasing, and the government lacks the capacity and is not innovative enough to work on these issues.
Clearly, this is something we can go on and on about, but I'd like to thank you so much, really, for sharing your thoughts with us tonight on the program. Mr. Shehu Gabam, the National Secretary, Social Democratic Party. It's been a great having you on the program, as well as Ambassador Habib Habu, who is a former Consul General of Nigeria to New York. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you so much once again. Well, that's our program for tonight. There are concerns that some might be taking a cue from what played out in the United States, fine-tuning it and planning to reenact it in their political context. But clearly, that is not something that should happen. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Good night.